Welcome to season 5 of Ways to Love Your Money. I'm Elisabeth Dawson, and today we're focusing on some retirement and summer savings. And we have a great guest, Mr. Mark Willis, who's going to be with us. And I think he's going to give you a wider perspective, a wider vision on some great planning when it comes to using a concept called Bank on Yourself. So he's very passionate about it. I think you'll enjoy the show. I'm sure you'll have questions about it. So again, stay tuned for the whole episode. So at the end, you can get some questions from our audience and kind of get some perspective as to how this all winds together. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to upgrade your relationship with money? We created a free cheat sheet to help you discover the 7 hidden costs sabotaging your financial success and what you can do about it. Click the link below to get your free copy.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We have Mr. Mark Willis here, and he's going to talk to us about how to bank on yourself and some ideas about financing in this world, as well as some other structures and maybe some hidden time bombs. So again, thank you so much, Mark, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And, welcome.
Thanks, Elisabeth. Glad to be on your show.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about some of these retirement financial time bombs that you talked to me about earlier.
Well, there's several baked into the average, so average places that most of us keep our cash. Unfortunately, not many of us know that is a time bomb until it's already too late. One very obvious one is the 401k. Now, the 401k is the grand experiment on all of us. The first 401ks were issued in 1981, which means the 401k is not even old enough to retire yet. That's how new this thing is.
What a thought. That's a great point. That's a great point. I do talk about this in our Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
Well, the average balance is $275,000 for folks over age 50.
Wow.
So that's the big experiment that we've all been going through these last 40 years. And has it worked? I would say no. Not if we, enjoy 2-ply toilet paper and 3 meals a day. Because, on $275,000, you're not going to much more than about $500-600 a month of living expenses, to last your retirement years. So if you want something that, is equivalent to your current lifestyle, we've got to find something other than the 401k. And oh, by the way, back to time bomb, it's taxable in retirement. So I typically will sit down over the phone or on Zoom, and I'll ask clients all across the country of all income amounts, of all, various sophistication of their finances. I'll say to them, hey, do you believe taxes are going to go down or up over your lifetime?
Right. And the answer is always they think they're going to go up. And especially with the year that we're in right now, we know by the end of the year that we're going to have higher taxes to boot. So how do we navigate?
But yeah, well, I mean, it just baffles me that, I guess it doesn't really, for all the promotion that the 401k has gotten over these last few decades. But it baffles me that we are all in this grand experiment doing something against our beliefs. If our belief is that taxes are going to go up, and yet we're putting the vast majority of our retirement savings into something that will be more expensive to access in the future than it is right now, well, that goes against our beliefs, and that's okay. I get it. I act against my beliefs all the time. I might want a 6-pack, but I still love ice cream. So I still act against my beliefs, but we have to be honest about the fact that the 401k is not designed for you. It wasn't built by you. It was built by a government that is desperate for cash, and they're going to find ways to get at it. So
well, and let's dig a little deeper into that topic, because the government, financial institutions, big corporations created that strategy. And they created that strategy based on the fact that big corporations wanted to stop paying for pensions. So my bigger concern for people is, do you really know that you are 100% in charge of your retirement? And I love this concept and topic about the great experiment, because we've all been part of it. And as you just said, it's been around since 1981. It's not even old enough to retire yet. And the average savings in a 401k at $275,000 is definitely not a lot. So if you're trying to reproduce let's say $100,000 income per year and keep it up with inflation, how long is that $275,000 going to last? Not very long. And Social Security is not going to get you there. So we believe that taxes are going to get bigger in the future. They're not going to get less. And the misnomer that we've been kind of brainwashed to think is when we get into retirement, our taxes are going to be lower, or we're going to be in a lower tax bracket. Well, if you're planning for a lower tax bracket, you're planning for failure. I don't know, Mark, do you agree?
I agree. Well, and by the time you're retired, typically your best tax deductions are gone. All the kids are out of the house. The mortgage might be mostly paid off. I mean, what do you have left? Most of your charitable deductions and so forth. You're trading volunteer hours for the donation dollars you used to give. So typically you're in a higher or at least equivalent tax bracket, and that's assumed taxes don't go up. I mean, Elisabeth, if you give the government 20, 30, 40 years to make up their mind on whether they're going to, increase their taxes on you, you can bet what they're going to choose, right? I kind of liken this to, trick-or-treating. When I was a kid, I was definitely the nerd in the neighborhood. And I can imagine, yeah, that's okay. I absorb that. I take it as a source of pride now.
The most successful people were kind of nerdy. I was a little bit too when I was younger.
Right. That's right. Well, you were the cool nerds. I was the nerds nerd. But I can imagine with me, you and I are going trick-or-treating, and these couple of bullies show up in front of us and say, hey, kiddo, we're going to take some of that candy. When you get back to your house, you're going to have to give us some of that candy or we're going to beat you up. And you look at them and you say, well, how much are you going to take? And they look at each other and they're like, you know what? We're going to vote on that when you get back. And isn't that kind of how the 401k is, right? They haven't voted on how much of your 401k they own yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, you're a partner with the government in your 401k, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Well said. Well said. So you have some solutions, and we were talking about, everyone finances their way through life. So I'd love for you to elaborate on that, and then how we can possibly dovetail into the conversation about how can we be our own bank? How is the concept of how we become our own bank?
So I'm a certified financial planner, and there's hundreds and hundreds of, parking spots for your money. And, all of them make your money do different things. So the very first and most important thing to say here is spend some time during or after this podcast episode to think about what you want your money doing for you. And, the best part, what I love about your show is you engage people in a way that helps them get clear on what they want their money doing for them, Elisabeth. So way to go. Good on you for that.
Oh, thank you.
I think for me anyway, one of the best kept secrets in the financial universe, if I can say it that way, is a way you can become the banker in your life. I honestly don't care if your brokerage account got 6% or 8% last year. If you're spending, like most Americans, interest in the realm of 30% of your income, and that's the average. According to the U.S. Commerce Bureau, the average American spends over a third of his or her income just financing their debts, mortgages, car loans, student loans. And even if you pay cash for things, even if you're beating the debt project by just paying cash for everything you buy, guys, the truth is you finance everything you buy. Either you pay interest to a banker, or you pay cash and you pass up interest you could have earned on the money had you just left it invested, right? So we're always trapped on this kind of horizontal line of the horizon of net zero. Net zero is our horizon line, right? But the idea of being your own banker, of bank on yourself, is what if you could, literally bank on yourself? What if you could become your own source of financing, pay yourself an interest like the banks are currently charging you? You can absolutely beat the financing rackets. You can beat even paying cash for things when you are your own banker. When you're sitting on the right side of the banker's desk, everything else becomes easier.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the bank on yourself concept. What are you doing? How are you migrating people through becoming financially independent, financially fulfilled, and protected? What's the process?
Yeah, it's a cool concept to think like a banker, to understand that you can control the banking function in your life, but we also need to bring it down the ladder to some actual financial vehicles. And Elisabeth, I know you handle and work with clients to do exactly this, but But the concept of bank on yourself is awesome, but we need a tool, to implement. And I don't exactly have $100 million to go start an FDIC insured bank. So what can I do to bank on myself, right? I don't have a bank charter. So what can we do instead? One of the interesting financial tools that I'm familiar with is something called a dividend paying whole life insurance policy. And unlike the kind that we may have heard on certain radio shows by certain radio gurus, this is categorically different than the kind of whole life insurance that we may have heard about on those radio shows. It's more for the cash accumulation. It's building up some wealth in the policy, the life insurance policy. I don't have to die to get access to the money in my policy, thank goodness. And the policy does a couple of things really well. It grows on a guaranteed basis every single year, no matter what's happening in the stock market. Second, it's accessible to me for any reason. I can send my daughter to college with this money, or I can invest in real estate or the stock market if I chose, or I could pay off an old student loan or whatever else, right? Third, it's tax-free when I get the money out. Under current law, both principal and gains can be accessed with no taxes due, much like a Roth IRA, but without all the red tape of Roth IRAs. So that's 3 reasons to have it. Of course, I guess the fourth is it is life insurance. So it's covering that base for our family as well. So that's it briefly. We can, I guess, talk deeper about how we can borrow and use it like a bank, if you'd like, Elisabeth. But that's how whole life insurance, the bank on yourself way, is designed.
It's a long-term concept where whole life insurance is a tool. There's many tools in the toolbox, but it's all the things that people are looking for. So what I'm hearing from you, Mark, is we want to have liquidity. We want to have a death benefit for protection for our family along the way. But in the future, we want to be able to use that cash. Am I hearing you right? And we want to use that cash tax-free. And possibly in the future, could we use it to supplement retirement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those things. Forgive the pun, but it's kind of a whole life solution.
I love it. I love it. Whole life solution.
Sorry, I'm dad jokes abound here. So, but you really get a sense. When I look at my annual statements on my policies that I currently have, and my wife has, and my daughter has, it's interesting because I know on a guaranteed basis exactly what my minimum net worth will be this year and next year, the next year. And every point along the way, all the way up through retirement, I know precisely with guarantees built in how much I can take out of this policy with no taxes due. I mean, doesn't that begin to sound a little like a financial plan?
It sounds a lot like a financial plan. It sounds like a great tool in the financial planning process.
Could we do anything like this with real estate or stocks? I mean, yeah, we have historical data and Monte Carlo scenarios, and obviously you're going to be bored to tears with whole life insurance returns as it relates to some of these other assets. So I don't just tell everybody to just run out and cash all their chips in to go buy a whole life policy. It's meant to be the cash equivalent in your portfolio. It's a good, modest, middle single-digit return with no assets under management fees, no taxes due on it, but it's going to bore us to tears if we only care about rates of return. It's meant to be a steady, predictable increase it's like the plodding, marathoner versus the sprint. So that's kind of
and it's a complementing tool. I mean, even from the traditional stance of financial planning, which we're very non-traditional types of planners, but it's the foundation that's getting set first. So it's the foundation that you're putting together before you're bringing in the other investments, the other speculation, or the real estate, or other business ideas and passive income. Am I hearing you right?
Well, and I'll even say this. Choosing whole life insurance, the way we're describing this, does not mean sacrifice return. And here's a quick case study on what I mean by that. There's a gentleman who at that time he had about $350,000 in one of his policies. So right there, that surprises some folks. How could you have $350,000 of cash value in a boring old whole life policy? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just buy a term and invest the rest? Well, what he did, in the midst of the great, this was back in 2008 and 9, in the midst of the Great Recession when banks weren't lending, he borrowed out $350,000 against his life insurance, and he used that to go buy a bunch of real estate. He flipped about 22 properties over the next several years, okay? And meanwhile, his policy itself, the policy continued to grow as if he had not touched the money, which is a jaw-dropping concept. But his policy grew about $120,000 over the next 5 years without him paying a penny into it on its own. And he had the 22 properties that he had bought and flipped using that cash over the next several years. As house prices were collapsing and banks weren't lending, he was buying houses at 50, even 80% off. This is up in Michigan. So the power there was he got an incredible ROI on his real estate business, and his policy on its own grew another 120 grand by itself over 5 years. I mean, that to me is a winning combination. It's like Thelma and Louise. It's like, nitro and glycerin. They just work better together. Peanut butter and jelly, they work great together. So
I love it. I think these are concepts that so many people that we've talked to over the years, they understand that. But at the same time, the average consumer doesn't know because they're being told that, oh no, buy term insurance, invest the difference in the market. Oh, you're going to, now it's probably even, digital currency or something like this. And, we're forgetting again, the consistency of the foundation that we need to actually provide for ourselves. So is this right for everyone, or is it right for just certain people?
I love the conversations that I have with folks that are looking to have more control over their life. If I hear the words "do it for me," I usually run in the other direction, because if someone's wanting to offload their financial responsibility to an advisor, that's not a good sign. No one should care more about your money than you do. So I'd say it's not really a good fit for people who, are wanting to just fit in with the crowd, I'd also say if you can't save, if you're living beyond your means, you have to put money into a whole life policy. It takes capitalization. If you think about it, Elisabeth, a bank doesn't open its doors unless they've been able to capitalize,
Right.
You've got to have money in the vault. Same with these policies, even if it's just a couple $100 a month. We've got folks doing a couple $100 a month. We've got folks doing 7 figures a year into these policies and everything in between. So I'd say if you can't save, just start with a budget first or get some term insurance. There's nothing wrong with that for a time.
Right.
It's also not going to work well if all you care about is rate of return, because again, the policy will bore you to tears. There are some insurance costs in the first few years. So, if you need every last penny right now, for Saturday night, or whatever, then you probably should just keep a savings account and don't get a policy. This is a long-term, as you understand, this is a long-term financial vehicle. And first couple of years, there are some insurance expenses to set up the policy. You usually around year 4, it starts to increase beyond your annual contributions, but it still does take some time to break even dollar for dollar.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the peace of mind to have the protection, but at the same time, in the future, you're going to have some opportunity for liquidity. I love the case study that you just talked about the gentleman that leveraged his policy to be able to purchase real estate. I think that's phenomenal. It goes back to a story that I know of too, that when Walt Disney wanted to buy the land that Disneyland sits on today, he couldn't get financing. And so early on in my career, they had talked about this and said, well, the way he financed the land to purchase it was from borrowing from his whole life insurance contracts way back when. So if it's worked for Walt Disney and now it's Disneyland as we know it today, and that was kind of like the leapfrog to that step-by-step stone stepping, that's a powerful piece. But, Mark, I know that you're an author as well. I know we're getting close on time. Tell us a little bit about the 3 books that you've got.
Well, we've got several books, but the secret to writing successful books is to find great co-authors and just to write on their coattails. So every one of the books that I wrote is co-authored with someone wonderful who, has a specialty of their own right. We wrote a book called How to Be an Amazon Legend and Fire Your Banker, which really speaks to people who have e-commerce businesses. I wrote a book called, co-authored a book with Monica Sawyer, who's there in California. She wrote with me Real Estate Investing for Women. So you can tell right there, I wasn't the only author on that book. But we really focus on how bank on yourself type policies can be used for real estate investing. And we've wrote a book with about a dozen other financial professionals, all of whom are bank on yourself professionals. And the book is called The Secret to Lifetime Financial Security. But that brings up a good point, and I'll briefly mention, you don't just want to work with any life insurance agent to set up a policy like this. There's I mean, Elisabeth, you might know there's like 400,000 life insurance agents in the United States, and not all of them know how to design the policies properly. So I'd highly recommend you work with someone who's got explicit training on this strategy. And the people in the book I co-authored the book with all have gone through some extra training on this process to make sure the policy is designed correctly. I've met people who thought they had something like this, and it turned out it was absolutely riddled with fees or commissions, and or the tax advantages were missing. So you really want to make sure, kind of like an elevator. You want to get in that elevator, make sure that it's engineered properly before you hit that button.
Well, it's a big concept to understand, so education is a must. I think that, being authors of books and an educational material, that helps people do their due diligence to understand what they're doing. So what about one last fun fact? What about a fun fact about you? Is there anything that you want to share with our listeners about you and about what you do, and maybe if they want to find more information out?
Well, sure. Yeah. I'm a daughter of a 5-year-old. I'm the father of a 5-year-old daughter.
You're not the daughter. I hope not.
Special do you want to go here? So yeah, I'm the father of a 5-year-old daughter, and she and I love finding little animal bugs in our backyard. Yesterday, she found her first caterpillar. And so we're learning about transformation and cocoons. And, it's just one more reason, I think, again, to make a hard right turn into finances. If you knew as a caterpillar that one day you'd be a butterfly and it was already pre-written into your DNA, you could sleep well at night. You wouldn't be stressing about this big upcoming transformation. And I think the same is true with our money. If we have no idea what our future value of our retirement account is going to be, it builds a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of stress into our life. So if you have your contract written before you even begin with your future, where you're predetermined, it's already written into your contract. Here's exactly what it's going to be on such and such a date. You can kind of rest and relax a little bit, which is, gives you more time to play in the backyard with your 5-year-old or whoever,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for being here today. I think it's just a wide perspective of some information that most people don't necessarily understand or even hear about. So I'm grateful for your education for our consumers here that are listening and our listeners that are watching the show as well. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for being an educator out there. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very much. And if it's okay, I'll just mention briefly, folks, if you want to hear more about this Not Your Average strategy, listen to the podcast, Not Your Average Financial Podcast. That's our show, Not Your Average Financial Podcast. And you can kind of dig a little deeper into this. And lastly, make sure to leave Elisabeth a 5-star review. She works hard on this podcast, and I know she would love it. I know everyone working on her show would love 5-star reviews, and make sure to subscribe to her show so you don't miss an episode.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. We love all the kudos, and we love our fans being supportive as well. So stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we'll finish up the show with some questions from the audience. Have you gotten a copy of our book yet? If you haven't, Wealth by Design is available on our website, elisabethwithansdawson.com. We'd love for you to get a copy today. Well, I think Mark gave us a completely different perspective as using a tool, something called whole life insurance, that I think is powerful. We have used that in our practice, and it's something where it's not for everyone, but it is a long-term strategy. But the flexibility that it gives you without penalties or taxes, if it's done right, is amazing. I think that you should probably check out his podcast as well. And if you have any questions or need bigger perspective, please reach out and give us a call, and we'll have that conversation with you at 619-640-2622. We do have an audience question, and that audience question is I just paid off all my credit card debt. How do I make sure I stay out of debt? Well, don't use your credit cards. Here's the biggest concern that we have for people, because we have been in a society for so long that is on credit. You could buy a couch on credit. You can buy, literally, my son was looking at a baseball hat yesterday for $7.99 a month for 4 interest-free payments. Don't buy on credit. That is one of the biggest misnomers, that people think that they have to use and establish credit so that they can build credit. It's not necessarily the true answer. Whenever you go get a car, You get credit and financing, student loans. When you also look at phone, if you want to purchase a new phone and you're on their monthly plan, all those payments are showing up on your credit score. So the main thing here is, how do you stay out of debt? Don't live beyond your means. It's time for some cash flow planning. We call it a budget analysis. Look and see what you're actually spending. What do you have to have? What do you don't have to have? And where can you find the money so that you're not over expensing your lifestyle and expenses? So if you don't have enough money to pay your bills each and every month to accomplish your goals, then you need to reduce your spending. And how are you going to reduce your spending? It's going to be on things that are not as important. The sacrifices that you make today are going to pay off later, but they're all going to make sense. If you're not saving even from the beginning, at least 10%, 15%, I've even heard 30% of your paycheck, your gross paycheck, not your net. If you save and you pay yourself first, and you have that for long-term savings plans, you're going to be in a much better position than any of your peers, or even when you get closer to retirement or at retirement. Be a saver, or be like Katie, who's not on the show today, but she talks about saving half of the money she earns, and she's been doing that since she's a small child. Teach these pieces to your children. Your children need to know about the relationship with money as well. What are you doing to have a better relationship with money? Let's not overexpend our lifestyle just because we want something today, and then a year from now, not remember exactly what we spent that money on. If you really want to get out of credit card debt, it is a conscious decision to change the way you spend. Hopefully this was a helpful tip, and we'll be back again next week with another show. If you have any questions for Mark or for myself, please reach out to 619-640-2622. If you have some questions that you'd like us to answer on the show, email us at questions@elisabeth.dawson.com. Take care. We'll be back again next week. Hope you have a blessed week. Bye-bye. The information provided in this show is for informational and educational purposes only. This show is not investment advice, nor is it intended to address the financial needs of any particular viewer. The opinions expressed on this show are not intended to be an endorsement of any particular investment strategy or service of any other kind. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned throughout the show. Before acting on information in this show, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular situation and strongly consider seeking advice from a financial advisor.